Serve the Servants, the opening track on what would be Nirvana's third and final studio album, In Utero. First off was just a totally kick-ass song to start that album off with, but was also a song that contained some lyrics that were very personal to Kurt. Now, Kurt would hardly ever get personal with his lyrics, as you'll hear from Kurt himself in this upcoming interview, but it's the 3 lines from the second verse on Serve the Servants where Kurt just really lays it all out there. These lines were Kurt speaking directly to his father, Donald Cobain. The two had had a complicated history for sure. Kurt's parents had divorced when he was just 7 years old. His father went off and started a new family, and Kurt seemingly was just totally left out of the picture. So Kurt's frustration and anger towards his father certainly was understandable. So we have an interview with Kurt coming up in just a minute where he talks much more in detail about his relationship with his father, Don. And he talks specifically about a meetup. Actually, it was more of a confrontation that Kurt and his father had. It was around September of 1992. Nirvana were playing a gig in Seattle. Frances, Kurt and Courtney's daughter, had just been born. She was like just a few weeks old. And basically all of Kurt's family, his sister Kim, his mother Wendy, she was there. Frances and Courtney, of course, were there. So a lot of Kurt's family was with him that night. And little did Kurt know that his father, Don, had actually made his way to the concert as well. Now, Don had made his way backstage by showing a security guard his driver's license and state patrol ID. Again, Kurt did not know that his father was coming to this concert to see him. The two had not seen one another for just about 10 years at this point. Now, apparently Don had tried to contact Kurt, but their relationship was so estranged that he didn't even have Kurt's phone number, but he had left messages with neighbors and record company receptionists, apparently. Now, this next part that I'm about to read is an excerpt from Charles Cross's book, Heavier Than Heaven, talking about the incident. Don walked into the dressing room with Kurt's half-brother Chad. "Oh, hi, Dad," Kurt said, changing the tone of his voice to hide the anger he had been demonstrating moments before. For the first time in a decade, the 4 original Cobains, Don, Wendy, Kurt, and Kim, were in a room together. The Cobain family soap opera did not disappoint the onlookers. When Don saw Wendy holding Frances, he said, "Well, hello, Grandma," putting an emphasis on the grandma as if it were a slur. "How's it feel to be a grandma?" "Great, Grandpa," Wendy replied in the same sarcastic tone. What in many families might have been a humorous or sentimental exchange turned into an uncomfortable confrontation. More than 18 years had passed since Don and Wendy had divorced, but suddenly the original family was emotionally back in 1210 East 1st Street, Aberdeen, and the relationship between Mom and Dad was unchanged. For Kurt, it was a joining of his new family with the wounds of the original. "I was like, oh my God, not again," remembered Kim. The only different dynamic was Kurt's role. He was no longer the little helpless boy. He had become, with 16,000 adoring fans waiting on the other side of the wall, the patriarch. "You shut the fuck up," he yelled at his father, as forcefully as he had ever spoken in his life. "Don't talk to her like that. Don't you put her down." Quickly, Wendy, Kim, Courtney, and Brianne left the room. "Geez, you look old," Kurt told his father when he calmed down. He immediately assumed Don was there to ask for money. "I didn't want anything," Don recalled. "I just wanted to make contact with him. I said, if you're happy, having fun, that's great. Just try to keep in touch." In this next clip, you'll hear Kurt talking more about him and his dad, and specifically the incident that I have just mentioned.
Well, I've always kept a relationship with my mom because she's always been the more affectionate one. Yeah. My father, I haven't talked to him for about 10 years now, up until this last year where he seeked me out at Backstage at a show when we played in Seattle. And for a long time I had, I always wanted him to know that I don't hate him anymore. Just I don't have anything to say to him. I don't want to have a relationship with a person that just because they're my blood relative they bore me, you know. They're not, and my father isn't capable of showing much affection or even carrying on a conversation. So, just because of the last time that I saw him, I expressed this to him and made it really clear to him that I just didn't want anything to do with him anymore. But it was a relief on both of our parts, you know, because for so many years he thought that I really hated his guts, you know.
Do you write about this at all? I mean, was it lyric on Silver Servants?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the first time I've ever really dealt with any parental issues.
So, September 1992, backstage at that Nirvana show was reportedly one of the last times, if not the last time, that Don would see his son Kurt. It was only around 18 months after that meeting that Kurt died. Don would hear about the death of his son from all the places to hear about it. He heard about it from the radio, and he was just too broken up to talk about it with any reporters at the time. So obviously the news of Kurt's death hit his father, Don, and the rest of his family very hard, as you would expect. And Don and Kurt had had a slight reconciliation in their relationship by early 1994, a bit of a turnaround from that September 92 incident. It was early 1994 where Don and Kurt had spoken on the phone to one another, and Kurt said he was going to catch up with his dad just after the Nirvana European tour. However, of course, we all know that doomed European tour. We had the whole Rome incident in March, and by the time Kurt got back in the US, he just wasn't his same old self, according to everybody. So that father and son meeting that the two had planned to have, that just didn't end up happening. But yeah, there were definitely old wounds between Kurt and his dad, no doubt about that. Obviously, some stuff had gone down between the two of them many years prior. As I say, Don starting his new family, Kurt just not being a part of that new family, and Kurt just feeling abandoned by his parents. So yeah, the fact that Kurt and his father didn't exactly see eye to eye, you know, that's definitely a sad thing. But there is kind of like this cool ray of hope at the end of the story that I'll share with you here. So with Kurt and his father not getting on that well, it was pretty cool in 2018 when Frances Cobain, Kurt's daughter, she reunited with Kurt's dad, which of course is her grandfather. And Don is still together with Jenny, the same woman who Don started his new family with all those many years ago, so they have always stayed together. Kurt, of course, not too happy about having a new stepmom in his life. That was Jenny. But Frances Bean reunited with Don and Jenny in 2018. So it was like the new generation and the old generation, with Frances reuniting with Kurt's dad. So if Kurt and his dad couldn't patch things up together, at least Kurt's daughter and Kurt's dad could get along. So there's some kind of healing there in a way, right? If you want to look at it like that. It's a cool thing. So a bit more of a brighter note to end the whole thing on. So I want to say thanks guys for tuning into the video. Remember to leave a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to go that extra step, consider hitting that applaud button down below. As for now guys, we're signing off and we'll catch you on the next one.